so that we also can post this later for those who. Thank you very much, Zoom lady. All right, a few more people joining via Zoom. All right, so I want to first start off with introductions. Most of you probably know me. The reason you're here is because you saw my Facebook page. I'm Representative Jasmine Clark. I do represent this area, House District 108, mostly city of Lilburn, and also surrounding areas of a little bit of Norcross, a little bit of Stone Mountain, a little bit of Lawrenceville. Most of the Parkview students and families are in my district. I also have a few Meadow Creek families and a few Brookwood families. So thank you very much for being here, and I will pass it on to Ben to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Ben Koo. I represent District 2, recently reelected. Thank you all last year. And they redid the district boundaries. So the new district boundaries for District 2 is pretty much south of 85 all the way down to Centerville. So the only city that we have is Lilburn, but we now fully have all of Lilburn and the surrounding areas. And then it goes up a little bit towards Lawrenceville, but Lilburn is really the only incorporated area that District 2 encompasses now.
Awesome. All right, and Adrienne, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Adrienne Simmons. I am the board representative on the Gwinnett County Public School Board for District 4. And so I do represent the clusters by high school of Shiloh, South Gwinnett, Brookwood, Berkmar, as well as Parkview. I have 2 kids in the school system that feed into the Parkview cluster, and I am just ecstatic to be here tonight. I look forward to sharing some updates and soliciting some input if time allows.
Great. So speaking of updates, we're going to basically start with an update from each level. So we will start with the county level, starting with the county, then with the school board, and then move up to the state. I really wished I invited, but unfortunately our Congresswoman Lucy McBath was not able to come. She had a town hall on Monday, but hopefully the next time she'll be able to join us as well. But I will pass it over to my friend at the county level, Ben, to tell us what's going on in Gwinnett County.
Sure. And first of all, I want to thank Representative Jasmine Clark for inviting me out tonight. It's good to be here with you and Adrienne Simmons. I'm happy to share some county government updates with everyone. At the beginning of the year, I was voted as vice chair of the Board of Commissioners. So I'll be working more closely with Chairwoman Hendrickson, and you may see me leading meetings if she has to be away or is absent. As some of you may know, the chairwoman gave her 3rd State of the County address last week and shared an overview of some of the amazing things Gwinnett has been working on. So I want to highlight a few of those points. So first off, Gwinnett signed a historic water storage agreement with the state of Georgia last year that will secure Lake Lanier as the county's water supply for the next 30 years. So that's actually really huge. We have a long history of excellence in the water sector, and we were recently recognized for having the best tasting water in the state by the Georgia Association of Water Professionals. So that's great, and I can definitely attest to that, having moved here and not needing to filter my water. In order to keep up that momentum, last year we opened the Water Tower, a public-private partnership to pursue tech advancements in the water industry through research, demonstrations, training, and public outreach facilities. This will also help us attract and retain qualified water and wastewater employees. Speaking of retraining employees, Gwinnett County's unemployment rate is only 2.3%, so it's much lower than the state and national averages. Despite that, though, we know economic factors are affecting all of us. We're doing what we can to make things more affordable for regular Gwinnettians. Last year, we completed our housing study, which led us to create the Housing and Community Development Division in the county. The division addresses our complex housing needs, focusing on the creation of affordable housing, as well as ensuring everyone has a pathway to stable housing and can afford to stay housed. We're also working with the Georgia Department of Community Affairs and UGA on the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing to create a locally based plan to meet our housing needs. Bringing things closer to home, we have several great things going on in District 2. First, regarding transit, we will be using a $25 million federal grant to expand the Gwinnett Place Transit Center and increase the number of routes across the county. The county's 2023 budget made room for a local route from the transit center to Lilburn and Stone Mountain. We're also planning for a bus rapid transit system from Gas South and the OFS site to the transit center. Another project I'm excited for is the installation of new sidewalks on Pleasant Hill Road under the Ronald Reagan overpass, as well as around Plazas Las Americas down Lawrenceville Highway. These sidewalks will help us keep pedestrians safe. We'll also be installing a new traffic light on the eastbound ramp at Ronald Reagan that allows drivers to turn left onto US 29. Now to some more water-related news. We recently approved the Middle Yellow River Sewer and Water Project. It will consist of about 2,400 feet of new gravity sewer on the west side of the Yellow River. The sewer will run from north of Highway 85 along Lake Lucerne Road up to Riverside Drive. The project started last month and should be completed by this time next year or even a little earlier. Those of you who live near Riverside Drive will have a detour set up, but access for homeowners will be maintained the entire time, and construction should only take place between 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Those of you living around this area may be eligible to have your homes or businesses hooked up to sewer, which would be a great upgrade. If you want to ask about getting hooked up or have any other questions about this project, please feel free to reach out to me directly or to our DWR team at dwrconstruction@gwinnettcounty.com. And you can find the latest updates on GwinnettWaterProjects.com. I want to touch on another thing. I know a lot of people on the Mountain Park Community Association Facebook page have been asking about the tennis center and what we're going to do there. I wish I could say more. It's still under NDA for our perspective. As far as I know, the process will be, it will go to the board to approve a purchase and sale agreement first, which is a little bit annoying because that agreement will precede the publication of the plan. So we'll be voting on something that nobody else is able to see. But that purchase and sale agreement is contingent on the rezoning. So after that's been approved, the next month it should go on to the normal public hearing calendar. So the planning commission will hear it. We could potentially table it to give people more time to look at the plans and weigh in and provide feedback. And then the board of commissioners will vote on whether or not to approve that rezoning, at which point then that's when it's a done deal. But up until then, it's not a done deal. So there is still time to get involved if you want to hear about the plan. Again, nothing's public. I know there was an article that was published yesterday in the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Again, I cannot comment on confirming or denying any of the content of that, but do stay tuned. We will be publishing stuff as soon as possible legally. Again, I've been very frustrated with that whole process. It's not being as transparent as I would like for the residents, but it's in the process, and so stay tuned for updates on that. I may have more information. I will be holding my own State of the District town hall, I think in 2 weeks. So again, stay tuned to Facebook for news on when that's actually going to be and where. I think we're going to try to do it at the Lilburn Library activity conference center thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, stay tuned. Subscribe to my newsletter if you haven't on the county website. And my office can be reached for any of these issues or any questions at ben.ku@gwinnettcounty.com. And thank you again for having me here tonight.
All right. Thank you very much for that update. I actually do have some questions. I'm going to wait to the Q&A portion, but I definitely have some questions, especially about that sewer stuff.
Sure.
All right. Dr. Simmons, you're up. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with the school board?
I sure will. Good evening, everyone. And I thank you all for joining us, whether via Zoom or in person. My plan was to be there in person, but I was called away for work. I do work a full-time job in addition to serving on the board, but I'm so honored to be joining you via Zoom. Thank you, Jasmine, for putting this accommodation into place to participate virtually. It's very important to me to be able to share with the community, and even more important to hear back from the community. So I appreciate having a Q&A at the end as well. And so just to provide an update, I've been serving on the board now this is month number 3. I'm not sure if you all have been able to tune into the working sessions or the business meetings, but know that they are, those meetings are aired online typically every third Thursday of the month. So we do have a meeting coming up next Thursday, and you can access the link to those meetings online and watch them online as well. And so the last couple of months, we've discussed a number of topics, and I'm just going to briefly highlight some of those topics. I think one of the key dates that I want to share is around the Key Performance Indicator Dashboard, also known as the KPI Dashboard, that will be launched on March 15th. So here shortly, in just under a week, and you will be able to access it on the GCPS website. And what that dashboard will provide is some key metrics or data points or information related to how our school district is performing around our 4 strategic priorities. And those strategic priorities are the 4 E's, is what we refer to them as. And that encompasses empathy, equity, effectiveness, and excellence. There are a number of indicators that we are measuring to keep a pulse on how GCPS is performing. And so I do encourage you all to access the website and to check out the dashboard to stay abreast of our outcomes, our student outcomes. The information reported there has been collected via staff surveys, student surveys, family surveys. I'm sure a lot of you have taken surveys that have been pushed out by GCPS, even within the last week or so. I know that I received an email as a parent to fill out a survey about my experience. And so know that we are taking that information and that the district is analyzing it, and that the district is working to provide feedback to the community, to be transparent around the information that's collected, so that we are informed as a community and that we're aware of how we're performing, where there may be some gaps, where there are opportunities for improvement, and where we're excelling as well, where we're showing some great progress. In addition to that, I also wanted to note that the dashboard will be available in the 5 languages that are most used in the district. And those languages are Chinese, Korean, English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And so the dashboard is available in those 5 languages. So please be sure to check it out and share it with your friends, family, and other community members. In addition to that, we received an update related to college and career readiness performance indicators, also known as CCRPI. In education, we use a lot of acronyms. And so we received some feedback there, and I wanted to provide an update around how Gwinnett compares to the state and just the overall composition of Gwinnett. So we have about 50% of our student body qualifying for free and reduced lunch. So that gives you an idea of the status of our families. And we also have about 25% of our student body that identify as English language learners or English learners. And so that gives you an idea of who we are working with in terms of teaching students and supporting families. One of the things that our district leaders shared with the board and at the meeting is that we show room for growth as it relates to the performance of our English learners. And so we really want to keep an eye on those metrics and want to ensure that the district is making some progress in terms of supporting the needs of our English learners. According to the CCRPI data, the district is performing fairly well in the area of readiness, which is determined, I believe, by how our younger students are performing, how they're entering kindergarten, that they're prepared for school. We're also doing fairly well as it relates to content mastery, but we do show improvement as it relates to progress of our English learners. So areas of improvement there. In addition to that, some information that was shared recently was related to school safety. If you're a parent or just a family member of a student, friend of a student, one of the things that we want to ensure is that our students will make it to school safely and come back home safely. That's priority number 1, is that they are safe. And so our district has put a number of measures into place to ensure our students are safe. We have 113 sworn uniformed officers in the Office of Safety and Security. We have cameras that have been put into schools, visitor management processes. We've implemented exterior doors across our campuses. We have a Raptor visitor sign-in process put into place. So we have a number of security measures that the district has invested in so that our students are safe, that our parents can feel secure about their students being safe, so that our teachers are safe as well. There's been a tremendous amount of investment there. Something else that we've been talking about here recently is related to curriculum adoption. As you know, the district goes through a process to adopt curriculum, and I just wanted to share some of the processes or the steps in that process. And so what typically happens is that in January, the district will solicit vendors to provide curriculum materials. The teachers will review those materials, will receive feedback from the community, typically in October, around the materials that have been reviewed. A pilot will then take place in schools. We'll receive feedback from those that participated in the pilot, which the board recently was able to receive that feedback firsthand from some teachers that participated in the pilot, as well as administrators. There will be a recommendation made to the board around which curriculum material should be adopted. And then the board will vote on those curriculum materials. I'm pretty sure there'll probably be a question later around the adoption of, in particular, the sex education curriculum that it has been a hot topic here lately. So I'll stand ready to address those questions as I can. But that is just one of the curriculum materials that have been proposed to the board for adoption. And we are looking to cast a vote on the adoption of materials at this upcoming board meeting next week. Lastly, we also have an important vote coming up on the renewal of Dr. Watts' contract, our superintendent. I believe that a decision has to be made around his renewal by April the 30th. If there is no vote made, then his contract automatically renews. And so I wanted to also be transparent in that that is a very critical vote that is coming up here soon. And again, I stand ready for questions as I can address them, and as well as input. Jasmine, that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And so now we'll move up to the state level, and then we will address all questions all at once. So down at the state capitol on Monday, we had crossover day. And for those of you not necessarily familiar with the processes down at the state capitol, every session is 40 days. And on day 28 of every session, your bill has to have passed out of at least one chamber, because both chambers have to vote on the bill. So if your bill is a House bill, it needs to pass out of the House by day 28. If your bill is a Senate bill, it has to pass out of the Senate by day 28. And then they cross over. And the House bills will be heard by the Senate side, and the Senate bills will be heard by the House side. So Monday was crossover day. We were there in the Capitol until about 11:45 p.m. We started at 10 a.m. So it was a very, very long day, but it was a good day. So some of the things that did cross over, we had a bill, House bill, and I can give you the number shortly, but it's a bill that would raise the age of who is considered an adult when they commit a crime from 17 to 18. One of the reasons why this is important is law enforcement said it gets very confusing on knowing exactly when you can charge a 17-year-old as a youth, or when you can charge a 17-year-old as an adult. And there's a lot of, it gets a little murky. And so this would just clean things up and make things a lot easier to understand. When you're 18, you're an adult. If you're not 18, you're still considered youth, and you would go through the juvenile court system instead of the superior court system, except for if you're 17 and you're accused of anything having to deal with gangs. So that was a compromise in that if the crime is gang related, then you can still be tried as an adult. And so that was one of the bills that did cross over. Another bill that crossed over that I was very happy to vote for was House Bill 538. This was a bill that is going to basically require the state to use a type of literacy curriculum that has been shown to be better for those students, especially those that have learning disabilities or those who suffer with things like dyslexia. And it's been shown to be better. So very excited to cast a vote for that one because I think in the state, we've reconciled with the fact that after COVID and even prior to COVID, there is lots of room for improvement in our state when it comes to education and our state as a whole, not just here in Gwinnett County. And so I'm very happy that we are putting a focus on that. And that is called the Georgia Early Literacy Act. And the first one that I named was the Georgia Raise the Age Act, which is House Bill 462. Another bill that passed is one that has a lot to do with different types of businesses. So right now, if you are a minority-owned business or a Black-owned business, you are eligible for certain tax credits, and also the state the state will take that into account when they're looking at procurement of state contracts. This bill would add women-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses as well, being able to get access to those credits. And so also a great bill that I was happy to vote for, although I do think there's a bit of room for improvement on that. So crossover day was very, very exciting. A couple of bills that crossed over that I was not so happy about. House Bill 514 is a bill that I think the intentions were great, but I worry about the implementation and its effect on local control. House Bill 514 basically says it puts limits on moratoria that local government can put on certain types of projects happening in their area. And while I understand the intent, my biggest concern of this is it taking away the voice of the people in that local jurisdiction. Because now if they say, well, we don't want something, it shortens the time frame where they can kind of say, let's pause on this and talk about it. But it did pass. Another bill that passed that I was not so happy about was House Bill 189. This was a bill that increased the maximum truck weight that can, of the trucks on the roads in Georgia. On face value, it's great for economic development if you're a trucker. And some could also argue that it's good for our state as far as supply chain. However, the issue is there is a federal limit on truck weights, and the federal limit is 80,000 pounds. And so when we change it in Georgia to 88,000 pounds, that just means those trucks have to come off of the federal interstate and onto state and local roads. And so there was a lot of concern about the wear and tear on the roads over time. Now, to be clear, during COVID, during the pandemic, the governor did issue an executive order that allowed trucks to increase their weight up to 95,000 pounds. And so the idea of this bill was, well, this is a compromise. Well, the difference between the executive order and this bill is the executive order was temporary, and this bill is now going to be in law. And the long-term effects of having more trucks on local roads that might not be able to handle that could affect people like you and I when all of a sudden we have more potholes on the road or accidents. It takes a lot longer for a truck that is 88,000 pounds to stop than a truck that is 80,000 pounds. And so those are some things that we have to keep in mind, but it did pass. And when I say pass, to be clear, it just passed out of the House. It has not passed as far as it's not law yet. But that's something that I am paying very, very close attention to, because I do have concerns about how that will affect us.
And we do appreciate that, because I believe that's one that ACCG took a position on, is
Yes.
because it basically takes away local control. And it has a huge impact on local government, because again, if the more potholes there are, the more we're gonna have to fix our roads. That's coming out of our taxpayer dollars for our property taxes and sales taxes. And again, that's money that we would love to be spending other places, not in fixing potholes. And so it does have a huge impact on us day to day. That is one of these unintended consequences. Almost every bill has unintended consequences, and this one has a lot of major unintended consequences.
And by unintended consequences, I think it's consequences that we just kind of wanted to say, well, maybe that'll happen, or maybe it won't, but yes.
It will definitely happen.
A couple of bills that were introduced but did not cross over, but were of interest to people in my inbox, so I wanted to address them today. Number one was House Bill 517. House Bill 517 was another bill that would ban local governments from requiring certain types of building material, certain colors of building material. Basically, you can't do that. You can't say that a house has to be made out of this material. You can't, and it had a bunch of other things. The idea of this is for affordable housing. If you let people use less expensive material, they'll build less expensive houses. And that is probably very true. The problem with the bill is that it did not guarantee that if you build a less expensive house, you have to sell it for a less expensive price. And so my biggest concern with the bill was that you would get a bunch of cheaply made homes that are still going to go on the market for $400,000, because the market determines the price, not how much you built the house for. And so you got people running to the bank making double what they would have made, but we never actually fixed what we were trying to fix, which was available, affordable housing.
It also has the potential to just create junk neighborhoods.
Yes, and I've also heard about blight and things like that, and that was one of my concerns. That was another one that was opposed by a lot of local governments, because it really just, it basically said your community does not get to say what your community looks like. Excuse me. I went down the wrong pipe. Sorry about that. All right. Second bill, House Bill 380.
And that last one did not pass, right?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, let me catch my breath. House Bill 380, sports betting. So there were 4 sports betting bills moving through the Capitol, either on the Senate side or the House side. On the Senate side, all their sports betting bills died. They were voted down, no votes. On the House side, the sports betting bill sat on the calendar. The calendar is basically the list of all the bills we're going to vote on that day. And it sat there, and it sat there, and it sat there. And then at about 11:30 p.m., the speaker said, all right, we're about to take up the last bill. And everyone was on pins and needles about what the last bill is going to be, because there was more bills on the calendar than one. And sports betting was one of the ones that was left on there, and it was not called up. So at this point, we are likely not going to have a sports betting bill passed this year, although someone has said that they're keeping the door open for it to still happen. And there are ways for bills that didn't cross over to still find a way to cross over. Usually, I like to think of it as like it catches an Uber and another bill, and then gets there in another vehicle than where it started. And so sports betting is out there. For me, I don't really have a strong position on sports betting itself. However, what I was really concerned with was where the money was going to go. And the only way to pass sports betting as a bill and not as a constitutional amendment where everyone would get a vote is if you do it through the Georgia Lottery Corporation. And so basically they were going to make sports betting a lottery game, and then all the money would have gone to the Georgia Lottery Corporation, which then goes to Hope and pre-K. And it was slated to bring about $100 to $125 million into that pot. And so a couple other bills that didn't cross over that I'm actually happy that didn't cross over, a couple of bills that did cross over that I'm not happy crossed over into the House that we will likely hear in the House. One is SB 140. This is a bill that basically bans gender affirming care in the state of Georgia. I think that it is medically unnecessary and intrusive. And so I was very opposed to that bill, and I really hope that it does not make it through the House, but it is very possible. And another one was SB 223 or 233. Now I'm getting my numbers jumbled, but it was a bill that has the potential to take money out of public education and move it into taking public funds and putting it into private education. And so I have concerns with that bill. All right, and then I'll finish with this. The only thing that I am constitutionally mandated to do as your state representative is pass a balanced budget in the state of Georgia. And today in the House, we passed House Bill 19. House Bill 19 has some great things in it, and I'm not, thank you. I'm not going to say that it is a horrible budget, $34 billion. And how do we spend that in the state of Georgia? It's one of our biggest budgets we've ever had. However, there are some things I'm concerned with. Number one, my biggest concern is that the governor promised that he would fund Hope Scholarship 100%. What does that mean? It means no matter what your SAT score is, as long as you got that 3.0 or B average GPA, you get 100% of the Hope Scholarship. You get to go to school in Georgia for free. Why do I care about that? I think that's really important because I'm on higher education committee, and they have told us over and over that enrollment is dropping, and it's dropping dramatically, and they need to figure out a way. And what better way to get enrollment numbers up than to give those students who are already headed to college an incentive to go to college right here in Georgia and hopefully stay in Georgia. That's the goal of that. Unfortunately, however, the budget that came out at the end of that did not fund Hope 100%. It funded it 95%. And you're probably like, oh, well, that's only 5%. That's not that big of a deal. 5% amounts to $26 million that is not going into Hope. And 5% for a student actually can be the difference between, their financial obligation stopping them from going to college and not stopping them from going to college. So it is a big deal, especially since we have a reserve fund, which is basically like a Hope Scholarship rainy day fund that has $1.9 billion in it, billion with a B, $1.9 billion in reserves, while we're only required legally to have 800 million in there. So we've got 1.1 billion extra dollars sitting in the savings account that's not required to be there. And it costs 26 million which is less than 2% of that, to fully fund Hope. And so it doesn't logically make sense to me monetarily for us to not do it 100% for our students and keep those students here in the state of Georgia. And so a couple of other things, and I'll be done, and I'd love to get to the Q&A portion. A couple other things that was in the budget. I am 100% for supporting law enforcement and making sure that we don't have a law enforcement shortage. However, the budget creates a $4,000 raise for law enforcement and a $2,000 raise for teachers. Again, monetarily, we could afford to give everybody a raise, and we didn't have to choose. And if I were to choose, I would much more prefer to invest in education, which we have data that shows keeps people out of the criminal justice system, than putting all our money, or more than our money, double the money, into law enforcement, and as if teachers aren't equally as important. And there's a shortage in both. So addressing the shortage, I get, but if there's a shortage in both, let's treat both as if they are important. And so that is my stance on that. So now, get to the Q&A portion. And that is where we stop talking and you get to talk a little bit, and then we'll answer your questions. So here is how it'll work. We will, I might have staff here. Yep, yeah, I have staff here that will kind of, let me know who wants to ask a question. You stand up, I'll repeat your question so those on Zoom can know what you asked, and you can direct your questions at any one of us, myself, Commissioner Koo, or Dr. Simmons. If you are on Zoom, I believe you can raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I will unmute you in the order that I see hands, and then we will take questions from there. Oh, and I see a hand already. All right, so I'm going to go ahead while everyone else has formulated questions, because clearly Sally was very ready. And I'm going to unmute you, Sally, and you can ask your question and everyone can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? Okay. First of all, my question is for Dr. Simmons. I have concern about the sex ed curriculum that is supposed to be implemented and possibly voted on in March. What is your feelings on the sex ed education that is proposed?
Thank you for your question, Sally. So as noted earlier, it has been a hot topic. I've received a number of emails around the topic. It's been discussed at our working session as well as in our business meeting. And so based upon the information that I've received since I've been board chair, the feedback has been one in that the curriculum that's currently in place, which is termed Choosing the Best, it was not a curriculum that was considered or under review because it did not meet the criteria that the district utilizes in selecting curriculum to be implemented in the school district. To summarize even more, what was shared at I think it was the January board meeting, was that the Choosing the Best curriculum is specifically a sex education curriculum. And according to state law, we must implement a comprehensive curriculum that reflects not just sex education, but it must be a comprehensive health education curriculum. And so the feedback that I received as a board member is that teachers did not recognize Choosing the Best as a curriculum to move forward in the review because it did not meet the state expectation of implementing a comprehensive health curriculum.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that, and then I have something for Representative Clark. The other question I have is the survey that came out, we all participated in, and 90% of the people who took that survey said they did not want this sex ed in the school system. Are y'all going to take that as part of your decision making?
And
I mean,
so
that's 90%.
That came up at the board meeting in January as well. As a board member, I had not been provided with that survey information. And so that was something that I did request at that meeting, is that the board be provided with the survey information so that we can take that into consideration. So that is something that the board is being provided with, is that feedback. My understanding was that the number of respondents to the survey was, I think, 500. So there has been already some question around, is that significant enough of respondents to signal whether or not action should be taken around the feedback? And that's just some of the initial kind of chattering or murmurings I've been hearing around that particular survey that was administered. But again, at the time, the board had not been provided, I had not been provided as a board member with that survey feedback. And so I am looking forward to getting my hands on it and being able to review it so that it can inform my decision.
Can I
Okay, great, thank
add to
you.
that? Can I add to that before you get to the question for me? In the state of Georgia, it is state law that we have to provide sex education in every school district in the state. So school districts don't get to decide if they will provide sex education. The only thing they get to decide is what type of curriculum they will provide. But you are mandated by the state to provide sex education in every school district in the state of Georgia.
Right, I don't have a problem.
Thank you for highlighting that, Dr. Clark. I will say as another point of the discussion that was had in January around this topic is that teachers selected Health Smart because it was comprehensive and included not just the sex education curriculum, but the other topics related to health that they are required to teach. I think currently what we heard from teachers is that they have to utilize multiple tech stacks. They have to utilize choosing the best for the sex ed curriculum, and then another text to teach the other concepts related to health. And so the feedback I heard is that that was not ideal. That's not something that teachers really were excited about, was having to utilize multiple resources. And so that was one reason why they were attracted to the Health Smart curriculum, because it is more comprehensive in nature, and they would be able to use one particular textbook or curriculum set to address both the sex education and other subject matter that comes along with health.
Okay, I just want to say I'm not opposed to sex education. I'm just opposed to some of the stuff that is in this particular thing. Dr. Clark, I'm sorry, Representative Clark, whichever one you use.
Yes.
You had mentioned the thing about the the thing that I think it was SB maybe 140. I'm not sure. The one that
140. Yeah, the gender affirming care. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I just want to point out that specific bill, because I've been watching it closely. That specific bill has to do with children, and I would like you to make that clear, because I
Yes.
think our children are under attack in the world today, to where they're being forced into different I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but they're under attack for having to have a gender or a pronoun or a certain whatever, and children need to be children, and that's what that whole bill is about. Children do not, and their parents should not, in my opinion, be making any decisions regarding transgender surgeries or anything like that. They need to allow themselves to have the mindset to go forth with that. And I just wanted to point out that certain bill is for children, not for adults.
Yes. So to clarify, this bill would tell parents and healthcare providers that they are not allowed to provide gender affirming care for their children. And so while I respect your opinion on the issue, I think that we should not be taking the ability of parents to do what they feel is best for their children in this situation. Gender affirming care and doctors who are, they are trained in this area. Gender affirming care is something that, it's not new. I know it probably feels new because everyone's talking about it now, but it's not a new thing. It's been around for a very long time. It's just now all of a sudden made it into the mainstream. And at the end of the day, the reason why I'm opposed to that bill, because I'm opposed to people who really actually don't understand the subject that well, inserting their opinions and their emotions into something that could very well be life-saving for some of these children. So I respectfully disagree with your opinion, but I do respect that you and I have a difference of opinion. But I think when making laws for the entire state of Georgia, we have to be clear that it's not just about how we feel. Sometimes because we wouldn't do something doesn't mean that we should take that option away from someone else. And so that's why I have the stance that I have on SB 140. But again, like I said, I completely respect that you and I are see this issue very differently. And thank
Yes,
you very much.
I just wanted to make sure that you clarified that it was for children.
Yes.
I personally
you
don't
for that.
care if you're 18 and older. If you're 18 and older and you want to do something, more power to you. I think you have to have the mindset to be able to do it first, though. And that's, like I said, we're respectful about it.
Yes.
Your
thank you.
difference of opinion and my difference of opinion will never equate.
Thank you. But thank you very
Okay,
much
thank y'all
for
very
bringing
much.
that up. And thank you for your question. All right. Are there
Thank
any
you,
other
Sally.
questions? Oh, go ahead, Dr. Simmons.
Oh, no, I just said thank you to Sally for her question.
Can't make this go.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, my computer is mutinying and not letting me do things. All right. Hold on. Hold on, Adrienne. Can you unmute, Adrienne? No. I'm sorry. I don't know why my computer is rebelling against me.
You're doing the right thing. So.
Yes.
I don't think I'm on mute.
Oh yeah, you're not. You're not.
I can hear you, and I think
It's weird because it says you're on mute,
Yeah.
but you're not. Okay. Are there any other questions? Questions on Zoom or questions in the room? Yes.
Long time resident of Milburn. This year. And I've noticed most recently, it seems that the new homes that we're living are not single family homes on single family lots anymore. Traffic in Milburn is becoming a problem. That was one of the great drawbacks of Milburn. We were a well-kept secret, close to Atlanta. Not get stuck in traffic, that is one way. So a couple of questions to that. Why such high density housing? Why are we seeing that? This is frequently asked. And two, with the high density housing, I like to walk places. I live right here on the road. I have a grocery store. It's less than a mile. I would walk to that grocery store if I had to get there. So I heard you mention some major thoroughfares like Pleasant Hill. But what about us that have been here for a while? Birds.
Great questions. Thank you for asking. One of the things, so we are right now we're working through thankfully the voters passed the 2022 SPLOST. And we have a selection committee that is working through the transportation projects that includes. A lot of those are sidewalks. So, and I know we have been working our way through, I think we've got a project right now, patching some of the sidewalk gaps along Killian Hill and Arcado, in that area. And I agree. I think we need walkable communities. And one of the things is, in order to have a really walkable community, you actually need density in order to, they go hand in hand. Now, density does not make sense everywhere. There are definitely places where it does not make sense to densify. We have established those areas on our 2040 plan. And if you look at the plan, there are established character neighborhoods, which should stay about what they are. They're not supposed to densify. And then there are other mixed use areas that are looking for like activity centers that are looking to have vertical mixed use, more density, where it's more walkable, where people can get to a grocery store without having to get in their car. But a lot of those areas they're different. So like, you know, what you would have right on Jimmy Carter is going to be different than what you would have even a block off of that. And so one of the challenges that we have is that, for example, with the city of, I don't know, if some of these developments are in the actual city proper of Milburn, they have full control over their planning and zoning that the county has no say in. So while we try to work with them to make sure that their plans and our plans are lined up. That doesn't always happen. And so I know Lilburn is trying to hyper densify in the downtown, old town Lilburn, in order to attract more people to get that walkability that's needed for various modes of transportation, for various character area feels, to get that the rooftops needed for some of those commercial businesses. I know that there's along 78, there's a lot of dying strip malls, and we know that there's a lot of restaurants that have left that we would love to have kept. A lot of the reason why they left was because there weren't enough rooftops to support those businesses. And so that's where things like around that area would make sense for more density so that they can support it. And being able to densify in places where it makes sense to densify, like again, along 78, in Gwinnett Place Mall area, for example. If we can densify there, that's what kind of is that release valve that allows other areas to stay less dense and to keep the density from going in those areas. And part of that is, again, following that 2040 plan, because that's where the infrastructure is. Our water department is using that for when they're planning sewer and making sure that there's capacity in various areas. They're using that 2040 plan, and that 2040 plan was developed with a lot of community input. This is not just what we think, this is what the community has identified as this is where we want to see density, this is where we don't want to see density. And so really the trick is to make sure that we're following that plan when we're doing rezonings. And we don't get a ton of rezonings in District 2 because a lot of it has already been developed. But I hear from people when there are zonings that come up for the county, and that's why I'm really happy that we developed the Mountain Park Community Association. I see we have Kay Pittman here, who's the president of that group. It has been a great tool to have these community associations for me to just kind of feel out the community and say, well, what is it that we want? And how can we work with developers to get a product that would be better than what their original idea is, or just denial? Because sometimes the zoning is actually an opportunity to get something better than what's there currently. You know, sometimes we've got these distressed properties. It's a house that, you know, is not being kept up. There are rats in there. It's falling apart. Sometimes rezoning is an opportunity. Let's turn this into something that's better and that helps the community. And so I usually look for those win-wins. Like, how can we get the developers to invest in the community and create something that's actually going to be used, that's going to be well kept, that's going to actually bring value to all of us who live here and are going to stay. And one of the challenges we have with, for example, some of these bills that Representative Clark talked about is it takes away that local control. So if it takes away the local control, we can't tell developers, hey, we don't want to see an all for rental community, or we want to have it be a 10% rental cap or something like that. So that way we make sure that we have people who are invested in the community that are staying, that are not just transient, because there's a lot of developers who are coming in now who are trying to do all for rent communities, and they're institutional investors who just buy up all these properties and then rent them out and are not actually keeping them up. They're not investing, and they're often not even in the country. Like sometimes they're out of the country, out of state. And that has been a huge problem for us. And so one of the things we've done in the last few years is we've redone our process for things like speed humps. So we can actually get a petition from the neighbors, get the residents to speak up about it, rather than just the landowners. Because again, in a lot of our communities, we have renters. And if we need, you know, however many percentage of the property owners to approve it, and half of the property owners are out of state, it's just never going to happen. So we now have a process where you can do a petition, talk to staff will put it on an agenda, and there'll be a public hearing. So if there's objections to something like a speed hump, there's plenty of opportunity to voice that objection, but usually people are good with it and they want it, and then we can get it through and make it happen. And that's often, again, funded by SPLOST. So again, thank you all for voting for the SPLOST.
Oh, and just to be clear, I apologize for those on Zoom. I did promise that I would repeat the questions and I completely forgot. So the question was from a person who's lived in Lilburn for 40 years. Did I get that right? 40 years? 26 years. Sorry, I don't know where I got 40 from. Sorry, 26 is very different from 40. For 26 years, and she was speaking on how there's a lot of traffic, and she was asking about the increase in high density housing over single family homes, and also the increase in and asking why we don't have more sidewalks in places like in the Miller Road area, where that she could potentially walk to a grocery store, except for there is not, the community is not walkable. And so that is where Commissioner Ku's answer came from. So thank you. Thank you to the person on Zoom who reminded me to repeat the questions. I really appreciate that.
Apologize.
All right. All right. So are there any other questions? Yes.
Sorry, kind of following up with the housing project. I personally live in Old Town Lilburn, and I wanted to just bring to people's attention, because I think a lot of people don't know, that right now there's a plan for 275 apartment units in Old Town Lilburn, right across from Lilburn City Park. And I definitely have a lot of concerns about that structure that's going to be built. It's also going to have a parking deck that I believe is supposed to be 7 stories. And that's going to be right next to my home. And I just want to know what we can do to fight this special use permit that was provided to build residential property, 275 units on a commercial zones area, and how that could possibly affect, you know, my personal school district rezoning if I'm right next to property.
So I'm going to repeat the question really quickly, and then I'm going to provide an answer, but then I'm also going to go to Commissioner Ku, because he seems very ready to answer that question. So the question was, the person asking the question lives in Old Town Lilburn, and right now there are plans in Lilburn to build 275 apartment units plus a 7-story parking garage. And she has concerns about how this will affect traffic, how it will affect the school zoning and things like that. And she wants to know how to fight the special use permit. The only thing I want to add is that I really wish that Mayor Dunn could have been here tonight. Unfortunately, they did have something else they had to do, and him and the city manager. And so they were not able to come today, because that would have been a great question for him. I was actually at the town hall he had where he announced these apartments, and I can definitely say that that left a weird feeling in a lot of people's stomachs. So
Yeah, so again, like Representative Clark said, we can't speak to what the city of Lilburn has decided, but I can speak to you as somebody who oversees a lot of zoning meetings, special use permits. What I look for when I'm making those decisions is getting input from the residents is great. So if you post, try to organize with your neighbors, and talk to the city council. Basically, when they should, if you said it's a special use permit and it's zoning, that sounds like it hasn't been approved yet. So this is your opportunity. And then from the time the sign goes up to the time it actually gets approved, that's the window to voice your concern, to work with developers. I would highly encourage you to reach out and see if you can get them to hold a community meeting where they can engage the residents and work with you to, again, create a product that's better than what their original plan was. Often they can make changes to plans to make it better, to address any of the concerns. Some of the concerns are not addressable. The impact to schools and impact to traffic are not things that we can use in making a zoning decision. But there are things that we can do to say, hey, let's address it in other ways. We can add riders that require certain investments in upgrading intersections, upgrading roads, adding sidewalks, things like that, that can effectively help to mitigate some of those concerns. And I'm sure Dr. Simmons can address how the school board uses that data to plan for future, but I'm guessing what they use is a lot of the same things we do is our long range plans for knowing, okay, this is where we expect there to be growth so that we plan ahead, that we know that we're going to get an influx of students in this area. We're going to have to build more schools, or again, in the transportation side, we have to widen roads or put other infrastructure in place. One of the things I've been trying to do with some of the zonings that do have more density is to figure out, well, how can we have that project offer transportation to the residents so that there aren't as many cars on the road, they don't require as many cars, so that they can have access to public transportation, so that because we've got a lot of millennials who are not wanting to have cars. They want to live in a place where they don't have to have a car, and that they're not putting cars on the road. So that's where if that development can work to provide access to public transportation while we grow our transportation network, it is critical to that forward thinking of like, how can we solve this problem in various ways. I've worked with my planning commissioners again to try to work through these SUPs, the rezonings, and we'll see what is it that is the community's concerns. How can we address the community concerns in a respectful way? And that way, we can, have our cake and eat it too. We can have the development that they want, or again, I'm guessing the city wants this because they presented it. This is something that they want or need for their tax digest. They can do it in a way that's also addresses the concerns.
So to follow up on that, and the reason I want to follow up on that is because Commissioner Koo brought up a couple of things in that meeting. One of the things they stated was that the price of the apartments was meant to not be for people who are bringing kids, but more so like the working professional. But the other reason why, because I always ask why, like, why are we doing the things that we're doing? And the thing about it is the city of Lilburn is trying to grow. I don't want to speak for them, but I think that there are other cities around us that are a little more developed than us, as far as like they've got more restaurants, they've got more stuff going on. And Lilburn is trying to be another one of those cities, like a city of Norcross or a city of Lawrenceville. And so or Duluth, yeah. So they're trying to get to that same level. But the problem is businesses won't come unless there are people there. And so a business bases whether or not they will move to a community based literally on how many houses are within a certain radius, how many people will likely come to there and patronize their business. And so that's really where that, I think that is why we're just seeing all this. I feel like sometimes the new townhome properties kind of pop up like a little pimple. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's another one. Like, oh my gosh, there's another one. And seriously, I'll be like driving down the road and I'll be like, all of a sudden I'm like, there were trees there yesterday. Where are the trees? And I understand the need to make sure that people have a place to live. I completely understand that. But I also can understand as a person who is, number one, a homeowner. I live in this community. My kids go to school in this community. I have to navigate that traffic to get to Emory University at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I have to navigate that traffic to get to a 7 o'clock town hall where I literally sat in traffic for a very long time to get here. So I empathize completely. And so I think we have to find a way to strike balance between, development, economic development, but also, keeping the character and the culture of our community. And so I completely agree with you. I would encourage you to maybe, I'm sure you have, or maybe you haven't, but bring it up to the city council. I think they need to hear from more and more people and try to see where that middle ground is. I think it's a shock to the system to go from Old Town, which we've all been in Old Town. It's a shock to the system to go from like what we think of Old Town to thinking of 275 apartment units. Like when I heard that, I literally could not picture it. I was like, I kept trying to figure out where they were putting it. And my brain could not process that. But that is a part of a bigger, larger economic development plan. And so that's where it came from. But your feelings and your concerns are very valid because I have similar. concerns.
But hold your elected officials accountable. Again, you elect us to make decisions on behalf of the community. And so the city council, a lot of those races, they have very low turnout. And so they are responding to the needs of their constituents, and they will listen to you because again, they're your elected official. So tell them what you want and what you need and your concerns. And they might have a different perspective, like, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is why we feel the need. But if collectively the city of Lilburn, the people in the city of Lilburn, do not want development and do not want it to grow or to be add a bunch of people, that will show when you elect people who represent those desires.
Right. Are there any other questions either on Zoom or in the room? Is that your hesitant hand?
Talk to that's one of those things where they was saying that local governments building specifically something.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the question was the bill, they were asking about the bill that would prevent rentals or rental neighborhoods. And so just to provide a little bit of context, during the pandemic, interest rates dropped really low. And so a bunch of people were like, yay, I can sell my house for, and property values shot through the roof. So people are like, yeah, I can sell my house. And so they sold their house either to, a family looking for a house, or some people just sold them to investors because it was really easy. They were like, you don't need an appraisal. You don't need an inspection. We'll just give you this cash and then you can take that cash and go move into your new dream home. So we saw a few rentals in that way. But what we also saw was investors just buying up properties and then creating full-blown rental neighborhoods. Now, I want to say, first off, I have been a renter before, so I do not have any issue with renters. I've rented a home before. Actually, I was a renter when I got elected. So it's not about that, but what it does is it really does kind of steal away that American dream of home ownership when all of the properties that are available get bought up and then nothing goes back on sale, it goes up for rent. And so even if you wanted to buy, that's not what's being built. And so I think we have to strike that balance. The problem is House Bill 514 kind of pumps the brakes on communities saying we want to strike that balance. And so it will not allow them to have moratoria for over 180 days, which is actually quite a bit of time. But in the long run, it really does tell communities what they can and can't do. And I just think even from tonight, I'm pretty sure the people in this room have all different political ideologies, people on Zoom. We probably agree on a lot of things and we may disagree on a lot of things. We might agree on some things and disagree on some things. But I think we all together as a community care about our community and we want to have a say-so in our community. And so that's why I was against House Bill 514, because I was just too worried that the state was taking away the voice of my neighbors. And so that's why I was against it. It did pass. It has gone to the Senate. I need to look to see what committee it was assigned to. I meant to do that. That was my homework, and I have not done that yet. Not making excuses, but we did have a death in our chamber. One of our colleagues passed away yesterday. And so it was a bit of a shock to the system because I just talked to her. So but I will definitely get that information so people can, if they are concerned about that, they can reach out to the chairman of the committee that it was assigned to. So the question is about Airbnb or short-term rentals, and actually, I'm going to punt that question to Commissioner Koo because that is going to be a local issue.
So there wasn't any bills?
No.
Restricting it, yeah. So thankfully that there wasn't a bill restricting it. We are looking at where, how to manage that, because we have to strike that balance of, if you're a property owner, you want to do something with your property. Again, if you want to rent your property rather than live in it, as an individual, you should be able to do that. The problem is with some of these short-term rentals, they weren't being taxed. And I believe that has been addressed in one of the recent updates. Last year, we were able to impose local taxes on that as a business. And the other thing is just making sure that they don't become party houses that bother the neighbors, there's loud music, stuff like that. And some of that we can affect under our noise ordinances now. That we've recently updated that. So we have some teeth we can use to shut down a party if it's getting too raucous in a residential area. It is a complicated issue, and it's something that's not just something that we're facing from our community. It's a national issue, just as like housing crisis. So we are looking at what other jurisdictions are doing and have tried. Some jurisdictions have tried things and it has backfired horribly and done the opposite of what they wanted to do. So we want to make sure that anything we do doesn't have those unintended consequences we were talking about.
All right. Any other questions on Zoom or in the room? All right, going once, going twice. All right. So on that, I am going to go ahead and close out the meeting by just letting Dr. Simmons and Commissioner Koo and then myself just to give a couple final remarks, like any last messages you want to send to the community. I'll start with you, Dr. Simmons.
Sure. Thank you again for all that participated. I do want to ensure that you have contact information for contacting not just me, but the board as a whole. I can be emailed at adrienne.simmons@gcpsk as in kindergarten, followed by the number 12. So that's gcpsk12.org. You can also email the school board as a collective at myschoolboard@gcpsk12.org. And I heard Commissioner Koo hit on this earlier around the idea of organizing. I will say that it is very important to me personally that I hear from the community so that I can advocate for what you believe and what your values are. And it's just as critical to enlist the support of your friends, your neighbors, your family, to also reach out to us and to come together and organize in order to make your voices heard so that I can uplift that as a District 4 representative. And so I wanted to just leave with providing you my contact information and just stating that I look forward to hearing from you and continuing to advocate for what's important to District 4 and to our Gwinnett County Public Schools as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to reiterate a lot of what Dr. Simmons said. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot to have you guys show up and be involved, asking questions, hearing from us. And we do want to hear from you. Again, we are your elected representatives, and we do want to hear what you think. Again, we won't always agree on things, but it does help to, when we're making decisions, just to know that there is an issue. Sometimes, again, we'll go through a zoning and we won't hear from anybody. So it doesn't really give us a lot to go on sometimes. So that it is helpful to hear from residents, whether you're for or against, particularly if you're for something. So that is something, we'll be doing something. We're like, I think this is the right thing to do, but unless we hear that, yeah, yes, you're going in the right direction. This is what we want. It can be a little bit discouraging at times. But so yeah, my contact information, ben.cook@gwinnettcounty.com. Email is a great way to reach out. If you want to call 770-822-7002, my office number, call, leave a message. We'll get back to you for sure. Yeah, I've tried to be active, but like Dr. Simmons saying, we want you to get involved. There's lots of ways to get involved. Again, I can't stress enough how helpful these community associations have been for me. We've got the Mountain Park one that is up and running. You can get involved. They're looking for more people to be involved, to be on leadership. So yeah, so the Mountain Park area is mostly unincorporated, but it does include City of Loveland. They can advocate for the area. So get involved in that. If you're in Centerville, we're creating the Centerville Community Association. And if you're on the Lucky Shoals side of things, we're creating the Lucky Shoals Community Association. So it's kind of our way of really giving that kind of organization support to these unincorporated neighborhoods and historic areas, really, because it is a good way to organize, to share ideas and discuss things at a local level when you don't have a city. Because again, the cities, that is the organizing body, is the city council. So.
Right. And for me, we just finished day 30 out of 40 at the legislative session. So I have exactly 10 more session days to go. And so I would love to hear from